2.4 gigabytes free. I just need to kill something fast.
Okay. So we're gonna so my friend Vincent and I are gonna look at this rock here. He's got a couple of problems that he wants me to resolve. So I'm gonna basically be going over some things. He's gonna be asking some questions. So we're waiting for some concept art here.
We're going live.
Oh, we're already live. I'm hopefully you can hear him. If you can't hear him, no worries. I'll fix it in post or something like that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is we're gonna put this in a folder, and this is our primary. So I'm not really too concerned about it. I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate it because we're gonna use this to. We're gonna use a decimated version of this to create some of the features.
Screen, Eric, please?
Well, I'm not sharing my screen on your end. Okay, give me just a second here. We'll go to share screen. Excuse me. There we go. Nice. All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So Vincent's got this rock project that he's been having some issues with, and we're gonna go over a couple of different things. So I want to do the etching part of the rock real early on, just to sort of like go over that. But you also had some cuts that you were showing in the rock. So I think we'll do the cuts first, and then we'll do the etching part, because the etching part's really cool. And when you get a second,
my screen? Sorry.
No, I don't see your screen yet.
You gotta enable the.
Oh, I've got to enable the share screen. Yep, good point. My bad. There you go. All right. So because I want to work off of a duplicate, we're gonna go ahead and take this guy. We're gonna decimate this. It's always a good idea to sort of. When you're experimenting or when you're teaching, you don't want to work on a piece that is the original. You want to make a copy, and it's always a good idea to optimize it somehow, like make it light. I'm going to take this down to 20% of 3 million, and it's just going to process this real quickly. So 3 million could be a little chunky, and because we're kind of like blocking things out, we need to separate the rock into a couple of different parts. We don't really have that option if the mesh is too dense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the slice tool, and I'm going to slice sections of the rock with the slice tool, or I'm going to do maybe I'll put in a curve and I'll cut away the material, and then I'll backfill the hole. We're going to try a couple of things. I like the idea of using a curve because I can have a lot more control with it, but it could take longer. So I might just use the slice curve instead of a curve. And this is pretty dense. It's having a little bit of trouble processing it. You see the process bar up here processing it.
So I sent you on Messenger the concept art because I cannot watch and share screen, unfortunately, at the same time.
Got to get you one of those second monitor things going. All right. So, let's see if I can open that.
Sorry about that.
You're fine. You're fine. Okay, it's very, very. All right. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and cut this rock up once I decimate it. There we go. All right. So you can see it's much lighter. I'm not too concerned about it being super light here or super dense over here. I would like to optimize it because the texture really shouldn't be added. The fine texture shouldn't be really added until the rock is finished blocking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to separate it into some sections. And I might even, once they're separated, I might even dynamesh it. But I'm just sort of trying to look at the concept art and just sort of think about, breaking this up. So in this case, I'm going to use the slice curve, and I'm just going to sort of cut this section off here, and then I'm going to separate it out, and I'm going to do the same. There's another section that goes through here. I'm going to do it up here as well. So it's not really super clean, but I really don't care. I can fix that later. And we're going to do another one. We'll do another one that's similar, and I'm mostly looking at this corner here for the concept art. So we're going to kind of come up, and we're going to do the same thing here. We'll go through the rock. Now I'm not going to go stroke for stroke concept art should always be sort of a reference point. It should not, I don't like the idea of adhering to reference art 100%, mostly because it's 2D and it doesn't translate well to 3D, from my personal opinion. And you can get a lot more out of it if you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. So we're going to run group split. So now I've got three sets of components. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to dynamesh these different components. This could cause me a little bit of a headache, but we're going to leave it and see what happens. We'll turn on double-sided so we can see what that mesh looks like. So that's a piece of mesh. And we'll pull that one down. That's the other one. And this one's got the same problem. It's got that weird little wing ding. I'm not going to worry too much about it. All right. So
can I ask, did you decimate this thing, or
I've already decimated it. Yeah.
Okay, that's decimated. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and run Dynamesh and see what it does. I always turn my Dynamesh down to the lowest value, because if the object is not built in scale, or if it's built in a really weird scale, it could turn into a real mess. And I'm getting the impression that this might be built in scale because it's chugging, which worries me. I'm hoping that we don't crash, because that would be painful. There isn't a calculation. I should have measured this. That's what I should have done. There isn't a clear calculation with Dynamesh. They should have like a little grid. I've asked them to put a little grid value in here to get an idea about how big the polygons are going to be when you Dynamesh or change the resolution, because it's really based on the scale of the universe. Vincent, did you build this in scale? Is this 1-to-1, as in, let's say this thing is 100 feet tall. Is it huge, or is it small?
I built it to scale, yeah.
Okay.
It should be 4 or 5 meters, I think.
Okay, all right.
No, even more. I'm putting it 6.
All right, so we're gonna make life just a little bit easier for us. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of this, and then we're gonna run close holes.
First thing, that thing is not proportional to the concept art.
I'm not worried about it. This is more about solving the immediate problem of how would you do X, Y, and Z. So what Vincent came to me with was he wanted me to break this part off and create these crevices, yes, in a larger structure, and it's just easier to build this out. And we're gonna have a few problems because the base structure was already being detailed. It wasn't really broken up. I probably should have decimated it a little bit more, but we'll probably decimate it again, because I'm gonna probably have to delete the close holes that I'm trying to run. And since we're waiting for the software to figure out what it's doing, this is one of my drop-down menus, one of my custom menus. Yeah, that's not pretty. It's not pretty, but it's not great. It's not horrible either. We're just going to go ahead and tag this and mask that and pull that up a bit and give ourselves some volume. And then we're going to change this to. We'll change this to 100 and see how nice the Dynamesh is going to be to us. You know what? We're going to work with that. We're going to work with that because I don't want to spend a lot of time fixing that. So we're going to just go ahead and dust the outside a little bit. So once I get all this working right, this gets really interesting once we make a few corrections. So you can see right now that this is sort of free floating from the rest of the other geometry. The other geometry, this tube here, we're going to low res that. That'll make life just a little bit easier. We'll run close holes on this. Cross your fingers. Hope it works the first time out. So this is my ZZ Modeler palette. It's just a bunch of really a lot of menu stuff that I'm constantly flipping through or needing. And it's basically just a really great way for me to have a lot of flexibility with my tools. Ugh, that's too dense. Let's take that down a little bit. Let's go to 100. Yeah, there we go. I want really, really low res mesh. So I have a bad habit with blocking things out where when I block things out, I forget to follow even steps that I use as instructional information. You should always take the time to block everything out very clearly in big, loose, chunky bits. Details are like the last thing that you get to do. So we're going to spend some time. We're gonna play with Vincent's rock here for this structure. Come on, Dynamesh. Oh no. Maybe if we're really lucky, Dynamesh will let me cancel. I need to change that value. All right, so the mesh isn't so horrible. All right, we'll do that. Bam. All right, so we've got 3 rocks, right? Essentially. Now, this isn't the only way to do this. This is just a fun way of doing this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep these guys. I'm going to merge these guys down. And then I'm going to auto group them. Auto group. And then we're going to go back in and we're just going to. Oops. We're just going to go back in. You'll notice that you'll get. This is the only thing I don't like about Sculptris Pro, is that you'll notice that it does get confused about the polygroups, but you just run auto groups and run close holes.
Wait, what's the Sculptris Pro?
Sculptris Pro. Give me a second here. So I've got a couple of issues. We're going to separate these out because it's giving me problems. And this can happen, but so let's see here. Delete hidden. Group split. Alright. We're going to run close holes. I'll answer your question. Just give me a second here. I was hoping I could work with them all together, which you can do most of the time, but it really depends entirely on close holes. Delete hidden. So what I'm doing is I'm running auto group. I should run close holes first. Running close holes, then auto group. Then I'm selecting the part I want to keep and deleting the hidden stuff. And the hidden stuff in this case is specifically what we refer to as floaters. So Sculptris Pro, for those of you that don't know, Sculptris Pro is this command up here, and it allows you to rebuild the surface. Ooh. Let's see here. It allows you to rebuild the surface while you sculpt on it. So you can see the density of my polygons are changing. That's based on the settings of the Sculptris Pro. Alright, so since we have these 3 rocks separated, and I'm looking at the reference, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the new knife tool. And we're just going to cut out some bits to sort of give us that rocky edge. And I can actually do a lot of really cool things, but I'm just going to go with a straight cut to sort of open up the edge here. And I can do a lot of fancy stuff. I just want to open up the edge. And you see how clean that the new knife tool works. It's really quite nice. And we're just going to take off some of the edges so that we get that sort of rock-like appearance. We're going to have to go back and forth on all of these so that we can kind of open up the surface. Because, you know, rocks should look like they were born from the main body. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. You see that gap that's creating a fissure? A fissure is going to give us a really nice look and feel. So we're going to open that up. Usually when rocks break, they lose corners, so knocking off the corners is not a bad idea. We can just kind of go through this. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I am going to just sort of, I'm going to do these last couple bits so we have some nice fissures. Alright, so we've got some nice fissures. From here, we can actually add our surface texture, but I'm just going to go ahead, instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use, I can use H polish, but I think what I'm going to use is, I have another kind of polish. I have a Verkin polish that I really like, that I purchased a while back. And I can kind of come in here, and I can just sort of scrub the edge. I'm just scrubbing the edges off right now. because I want there to be that sort of rocky appearance. I don't want it to look too mechanical, but I can kind of come in here and I can give it a hard edge if I really want to. It doesn't do inverted corners real well. It mostly does rises really nicely. The inverted corners or the recessed corners, I don't get a result that I really care for. And we'll do the other one as well real quickly. It's best to turn it off because it can pull on both sides, which is what happened here.
It's a nice polish. Is that like a default one, or is that you can get it somewhere online?
I can get you a link for it.
Awesome.
So I'm just scrubbing. I'm not really doing, like, to do that sort of thing. It's just not worth it for me. We're just going to soften that off a little bit. Okay, so I want to create that nub there. All right. From here, I would add some texture. Now, I don't have some of the texture tools that Vincent has, so I'm just going to use some texture tools that I have. We're going to kind of look at this and say, we're going to do this kind of thing right in here.
You want me to send one quickly?
Nah, because since we're streaming and this is just an example, I'm more concerned about getting something that looks like a result. But you can see real quick if I back off from that, while the surface is sheer or flat across all the pieces, which is a bad thing, I'm really getting a nice look and feel to this. Now we're going to fix that sheerness in just a second, but I want to kind of get in here and I want to add some of that more rock-like texture if I can do that without getting too crazy. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. So we can add something like that and create some layers. And of course you can do both an additive and subtractive process. But really what I'm going to do right now is, I don't like the sheer nature of this. So I'm going to switch to this part right here, and with the snake hook, I'm going to pull this rock down and in. I'm going to turn on Sculptress Pro for a second. I'm going to leave accurate curve on. I'm going to pull this down and in. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get that sort of cut back look. Like the front plate fell off. So that way when I do a quick render, you know, I get shadows that are a range of depth. And we would do that across the, do that across the whole spectrum, or we would come in and we would pull this rock out from the main and do that, and then we would get,
that's super cool.
So a more arranged, a more ranged look. Now in the concept art, which I'm not going to show the concept art because I don't know if this is for work or stuff, and I don't need to know Vincent. But I want to talk about, he's got some etching on this. There's a couple of ways to approach the etching. I'm going to come at it with the most direct way to get to the over arc, not the detail, but the over arc or the over structure. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this stone right here, the largest stone, and we're going to go ahead and duplicate this, because the surface that we're going to create is going to create a negative for this structure. So we don't want the primary, or we don't want the original, which is up here, and we don't want the primary that we're working from. We want this one. So it's basically got this set of curves in it, and this is going to be a little tricky. But what I think we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the circle clipping tool, and we're basically going to go ahead and mark this thing. What I'm looking to do is I'm looking to slice this, so I picked the wrong tool, of course. We want the slice circle. I'm not too concerned about this being round at this point. I'm just worried about it getting the bulk of the structure. There we go. So I kind of match this one up. And we can set this brush. I'm not too concerned about this. We can actually set this brush so that it is a circle, and we can pick a point to create that circle. Boop. So now we've got that structure, and now we're going to do the same thing over here.
Yeah, is this one making different polygroups, right?
Yeah, I'm making different polygroups, but I'm also trying to create the structure, the
All right, yeah.
Yeah. Let me just. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me think through my process and we'll discuss it. So if I do this right. All right. So I screwed up a little bit. This contour isn't following. I should have clipped, but you can see the core structure that I've devised is right there. So we need this guy going into this guy and transitioning out. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and use the slice curve. And we're going to slice off this back material. Get rid of that. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get this material. Again, this is quick and dirty because I'm just trying to show how I would go about creating the pattern that's in the concept art. So now we have this, right? So if I look at the original art, I can use this as kind of like an overlay. So what we need to do now is we need to get rid of this corner here. So we're going to run auto groups. We'll delete that. So there we go. Now, if you have weird transitions like this edge up here, which is really sharp, or stuff like this, we can use polish by features. So we run a group it all, run polish by features, and that'll help to eliminate some of the harsh edges. Also run auto group and make sure you're just keeping the bits that you need. All right, so this is going to be a cutaway, so I'm going to rebuild this. A couple things I would do really quickly. Snake hook, pull the surface out a little bit, just to make sure we get nice overlap. Same down here, depending on how you want to set that up. And of course you can fiddle with all the bits. I'm not going to worry about that too much. But I am going to go ahead and rebuild this. So I'm going to use ZBrush. I'm going to set it to half.
Sorry, what are the hotkeys to pull that, like in Maya, that menu, yeah?
That menu is a custom menu, and I have that menu set to A. So I built that menu for doing this kind of work.
Cool.
So I can go over custom menus at another time. Right now I'm more...
No problem.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting closer to where we want to be. I need to get rid of this edge here. We've really got a nice surface coming together. Delete hidden. Delete hidden. All right, we're going to pull this up. Keep an eye on what you're going to cut into. So I got to rebuild this one more time and see if we can get lucky. Yeah, so close. I want it to turn into what I can use as two bands. But I may have to just sort of slice off this piece here and just fudge it, which is what I think I'm going to do, because that's just maybe easier. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this geometry here. Delete hidden. I'm going to see how bad it is over here. Okay, I can fix that, or I can work with that. We're going to create the two bands that we need. So we're going to grab this stuff here. Now I'm using selection lasso, and by clicking on the edge with selection lasso, it'll take the edge loop out. So now I've got the two bands that I need for the structure. So I'm going to go ahead and delete hidden, and then we're going to turn that into turn that into a small. Actually, I shouldn't delete it. I should split it. I need that other piece of geometry. Split hidden. So I've got that other piece of geometry. Now, this piece of geometry here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use some hard surface modeling on this, but first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it thickness. So inside of edge loop, we can go down to panel loops. We can set our thickness. I'm going to zero out the polish, the bevel, and the elevate. We're going to see how thick it's going to be at 0.1. So 0.1's not horrible. I'm going to take it up to 0.025, which is a great number. It's one of my defaults. And then if we just quickly turn that into a negative, we're not done with this yet. But if we turn that into a negative, we can see that I'm getting a pattern here that I can see in the structure. It's not ready to go yet. We need to do a bunch of things to it. And also there's some junk on the ends. In this case, because this is a teaching example, I'm really just going to delete this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and go back to before I gave it some thickness. Normally I'd spend a lot of time cleaning stuff up, but as a teaching example, I just want to get through this, through the body of this, and then like those little fixes. When Vincent goes to do this for himself, he can he can manage to figure out how to clean this up. So we're going to go back, we're going to give this some thickness. Now let's get some thickness. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group these guys, and then I'm going to go ahead and do some hard surface stuff on this. So this overall isn't horrible, but we need there's some stuff in the concept art that I really like. Let's see here.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and auto group this, and then we're.
So can I ask what was the tool to basically you bevel the edges, right? Or extruded them, made
Yes.
more.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'll show you some of the tools. So I know I'm flipping through some of this stuff. First thing I should show you guys is this. So we'll go back. We'll go over here real quick. So this part right here, I selected when I want to make these all different groups. I go and I hit auto group. Auto group's going to make them all different groups. But if I hit Control W, they'll all be one group. So Control W is a built-in hotkey. The edge loop thing is actually pretty easy. So inside of Zbrush, inside of ZModeler, I'm using ZModeler now. ZModeler is loaded. The hotkey for that is BZM, in that order. If I go in here, I can insert edge loops. I can insert multiple edge loops or single edge loops. In this case, I'm going to insert a multiple because I want 3 edge loops. And I can just click on the edge and it's going to give me 3 edge loops. And then from there, I can do things like, say, for instance, I want to take a look at my penetration. My penetration is not that great. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to Q mesh. In this case, polyloop. I could use polygroup, but polyloop. And I'm going to extrude that and then click on the other one to extrude the others. So when I come back out, you can see that the negative surface that I'm creating is creating this pattern that goes through the rock. Now I do have a couple of bad areas, easy enough to fix. I just need to give the thing more thickness, which in this case, we'll just pull up that outer edge. That'll be smarter than other things I can do. And now I've got this stepped pattern. If I smooth this, go to 7D preview, it looks like that. It's not as nice as what I'd like it to be, but we can go in here, we can crease it, we can bevel it, we can do all sorts of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, in this case, I'm going to bevel this. So I'm going to bevel. We're going to bevel that edge. I'm going to bevel that edge. Now that I've set my dimension, I can just click on the edges that I want to bevel. And now if I press D, you can see that this is relatively crisp while this is soft. Whereas if I were to crease the edges, I'm going to run crease. This one's super hard, and this one's now soft. So in this case, beveling is better. So we'll go back in here. We'll bevel the edges on these guys. And once this is done, you know, we've done the body of our work for this component. So now that pattern that's on the rocks is built in and ready to go. And from here,
nice.
We do something very similar with this part here, except this part has a pattern on it. So there's a couple of ways to handle that. I don't have a pattern loaded at this moment. But what I would probably do is I would go and find a pattern, and then I'd load it into ZBrush, I'd turn it into geometry, and I'd make it follow the central path like a curve. So since I have curves here, I'm gonna grab.
When you say pattern, like a CG, something from CG textures.
Well, you can grab any texture really. It all depends entirely on what you have available to you. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like if I got
one really cool if you want to try it.
Well, I don't want to go through the process of. I'm going to work with what I've got instead of getting more files. Yeah, now I've got brain damage. All right, so I want to divide this cleanly, so I'm going to divide this right in the middle. we use multiple because multiple will give me a clean divide in the middle. I can go auto groups. Now I can do selection. There we go. So that's going to be 1/2, and that's going to be the other half. Now, I don't have. I was hoping I had some chains loaded. Maybe I've got chains up here. Brushes. I don't think I have any chain curves or anything like that. Curves. Maybe we've got something. I don't think any of these are going to do what I want them to do. Alright, so because we really want to move through this and I don't want to spend a lot of time, if you go to stroke, and go to stroke curve modifiers, and we're going to set it to polygroups, we can build a curve in there. And while I don't have a chain or anything on hand, we're going to go ahead and grab a regular curve, and in this case we're going to go ahead and drop. We click on that curve and it applies this piece of geometry, and if I click off of there, we can see that piece of geometry is built into my scene, and in this case we can turn it into a negative, and we want to get rid of or hide. I'd usually just delete this or split hidden because we can use it for later. I'd hide that piece of geometry out of there, and now we've got this piece of geometry running through the center channel. Now if this was a pattern or something, we could apply this pattern, we could apply it as a pattern like a chain or letters or scroll work. We can apply it very much in the same way, where we would apply it to the base, that base mesh. And what we've basically done is we've used the pattern, we've used the structure that we created, that base structure. We've used that in two different ways. Now, if I had all the tools set up, this would be how I would bring it into the world or how I'd apply it to the work. And it really doesn't take a lot to do this kind of thing. That's why I'm showing this in a very simple format, because you usually have your pattern set up. You usually know, where your reference material is coming from. Me, I'm doing a lot of this on the fly, and I'm just trying to show you the broad strokes. It's not terribly looking like the concept art, but it's close enough for Vincent and I to have the conversation, which is basically, get your blockout done. Don't go too high res. Get your structures all figured out in relationship to each other. Block everything out before you do any detailing. Keep everything light. I mean, if you look at this structure here where I did do some details, for instance, this area got a little bit dense, but I can actually work with this, and then I can decimate this and then go to another area and, knock out the rest of it. It didn't need to be that crazy, but this is just sort of one of the ways of doing things. And breaking even rocks and other structures into component parts or into smaller pieces is really a good way to go. And then, of course, if you have a pattern like this, figuring out how to cut away the material to have the pattern, to build the pattern on an irregular surface, that's really kind of crucial. And there's nothing really magical or crazy about it. It's just about process. What step is going to lead to the next step, which is going to lead to the next step, which is going to lead to the next step. So what else do we need to do, Vincent? What else do you need to know?
So we cut it up. We afterwards we do some mega scans on it. So
okay, so you're gonna throw patterns on it. Yep, that's pretty common. Yep.
Yeah, the polygroups. So probably I would need to get those polygroups together, group them for the mega scan, and then.
Okay.
Well, actually, I would use the mega scan first, and then I would break it off. So it gives me.
No, I wouldn't. The mega scans or the textures is the last thing that you should be doing. It should be the very, very, very last thing, because that's your detail work. So you want to keep things light and easy to work with. If you apply that stuff too early, what's going to end up happening is you're going to end up having a very dense piece of geometry that's going to be hard to work with. You want to keep your geometry light until it's time to apply those pieces of dense information into your scene. Same thing with what I'm doing now, which is distressing the texture, the carving. By coming in here and doing this, this should be the last thing I do. You want to start off making it, except for these big cracks and things, you want to start off making it as new, to want to make it look as new as you can make it, and then adding textures, adding high resolution textures. All of that stuff is the last thing you do, because that's the thing that is going to distress the model the most. Which, by the way, me distressing this section, I haven't applied the geometry or the Boolean to that section. I'm just messing with the primary structure to sort of see how rough I can make it look and still maintain a given texture. So you can kind of see right there that they really roughed it up.
So this like frame thing where the letters would go, it's not really getting affected by this, right? Just because it's on another layer.
It's getting affected. It's just that it's a very deep structure in the concept that I put together. But if I undo it, if I go back, if I Z back, you can see that the surface geometry is coming up. If I go really deep, if I go really deep with the tool, I can obliterate down through that structure. And once I'm done, if I really want to maintain that, I can keep that. Or I can even come in here with, say, for instance, the move brush and pull it up so that some of those other structures, some of those carvings punch through. Now, I can't have this happen because, that's just not how things work. But I can pull these other areas up. And what I'm pulling on is I'm pulling on the base rock structure. I'm not messing with these other subtool layers.
So would you, let's call it a frame or what have you, the thing where the letters are going, would you use booleans? I'm gonna
use booleans for all of those, for where the etching is going, which is where the center channel is. Where these secondary channels, these decorative channels, those are going to be booleaned out. In fact, here, let me run. So after this is done, this geometry is pretty dense, and we can actually boolean with that. But it's a really good idea to just sort of clean it up just a little bit. So I'm going to knock it down by 30. I'm going to knock it down to 30%, just to make the boolean operation relatively light. You wanna decimate where you can. It's a judgment call how you use it. I can't tell you when to use it. I can't tell you what the best method is for using it. Chewbacca's watching us. Hey man.
Hello.
I don't know when that went up though. All right. So decimating this didn't do nearly as much as I would have liked. We've maintained the detail, but we've reduced the geometry in other areas. I would have liked to take it down a little bit more. So we're going to turn off these other stones because we just want to decimate this. We want to boolean those two parts. Because I want this to be smooth, I need to make sure that that's in sub D preview. And that one, we're going to take this one out. We don't really need it for the example. So there we go. So now we've got this set up. If I go over here, I go to Boolean with subdivs. And it's going to process this, and it's going to spit out the finalized part. If I look at the finalized part, you can see the polygroups and the information that was there for that curve. And now we're able to have a finalized piece. And you can see here that the back of the curve shows up here, but it doesn't show up here. This is that's the main rock structure popping through, because it has a different depth. So we can actually see rock pattern here and carving pattern here, as an example. But yeah, this could be used just as it is, you know. And you use that for mapping, or for actual 3D printing, or for high-res film as is, you know, especially if it's going to be at that shot or angle. So you really just kind of have to pick and choose how you're going to finalize your stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. That answers more of your questions, right?
Yeah. So I was wondering, got where is it? Like this texture that back in 2013 we would, from CG Textures, right? It's, if you go to CG Textures, it's more-ish ornament. So back in 2013 we had to what's the word in English? Put it in Photoshop and to do a bunch of stuff to it in Photoshop to get the alpha. So it's basically, we made an alpha from CG Texture. Well, which is like an ornament writing.
There's a number of ways to go about doing that sort of thing. So one of the ways that you could do it is that you can create a singular alpha. Another way to do it is to bring in what's known as a let's see here. In text, you can bring in an SVG file. So if you go and find, you can go online and find an SVG converter. You can go find some text or a script or something, and you can load it into an SVG converter, and an SGV converter will turn it into geometry. In here, when you bring in an SVG, you can make it into geometry.
Oh wow!
So that is how I would do it, because then I can create exactly what I want, and then from there I would make it into a curve, because making it into a curve brush would allow me to send it along the path, and then I would get a very distinct and exact structure. It's not really complicated. This is very old tech. We've been using this for years. It's funny to me though that people think that you need to use an alpha. I have a problem with high-res alphas. I use booleans more often than not, mostly because I can get more out of them. I'll show you what I mean. So I've got a couple of tech brushes. This one in particular, this one's all about, you know, cutting holes in things. So if I go ahead and make a new folder, I jam this in here. This object, make sure it's good on the other side. We'll split this part. We'll split that off. So this object, when I turn this into a boolean and I make sure that it's sub-D preview, that's going to give me better results than if I took this exact thing as an alpha and applied it to the geometry that's around it. Because the geometry that's around it is garbage. And I mean garbage as in it's low res, it's not going to support the alpha, so on and so forth. I can apply this and get a much better result with this tool and tools like it than I can with, you know, other things. Or I can get a much better result with this than with an alpha. And then if I apply these, I'm going to apply these because we can. We're just going to apply these. If I need to distress them for some reason, and I should have done these as Boolean with sub-D preview, but we don't care that much. But if I need to distress these for some reason, a little bit of Sculptris Pro, you know, just kind of go across the edges and just sort of rough them up. You know, I can actually sculpt on these or use these in a number of different ways. This is not how I normally do this, but this is just sort of like discussing how you would add a script through this area between the two pathways. Again, it really depends entirely on what kind of result you want, and I want the best results possible, so I'll build it.
Can you check the messenger? So I sent you that thing. So would I model that out and then use the booleans here in ZBrush, or could I use that as an alpha And how would I make an alpha from that nowadays?
Okay, I would
as
take
opposed to-
I just like I said before, I would take exactly that. I might trim it. I might trim it to make my life
sure,
easier.
Yeah.
But I would take that and I'd run it through an SVG converter.
And the SVG converter is the thing in Zbrush, right?
No,
It's not anything-
an SVG converter is something you're going to have to find online.
Ah.
So,
Oh yeah. My bad.
Yeah, and you go into the texts and you go new SVG and you bring it in from there. That has a lot of visual noise in it. I might clean it up in Photoshop beforehand, but because I'm also kind of lazy, I might run that through. I might try and force feed that into an SVG converter first. You know, I think that you might get a usable result out of that. You also might get garbage, but whatever. You got to figure out what corners you're willing to cut, and you got to figure out what direction you're going to go in. But yeah, there's two or three SVG converters that I use online, and I'll take all sorts of things and throw them in there. A lot of times I get garbage, but sometimes I get something that I really want. Sometimes I have to take it into Photoshop and clean it up or convert it into a Photoshop file and then throw it in the SVG converter.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, it's about experimentation. You need to walk up. You need to walk up, big, bold, and brass, and try things to see what's going to happen. And that's just that's just the way this goes. So I'm going to suggest you go online, check out an SVG converter, take that texture, throw it in there, and see what happens. And then when you get the texture, which should be a black and white texture, load it into new SVG. Go to
over there. All right. On the left.
Go to ZBrush. Yeah, go to Text 3D and Vector Shapes, which is what you're doing, and you do new SVG file. It'll allow you to load it up and then see what happens. And SVG may convert it into. If it's a good file, it'll convert it into geometry. It may not be perfect the first time out, but you can edit it from there. I don't have any SVGs available at the moment. Otherwise, I'd just show you how one gets done. But because it can be a little time consuming.
Or just what tool again did you say you would use for to put in there? It looks like some type of a curve. Which was it? There was one.
Well, you're gonna if you no. All right. So you get your SVG file.
Yeah.
You click new SVG. It takes that data and it turns it into a piece of geometry. Then you take that piece of geometry and you clean it up or edit it or make it the way you want it, and then you convert it into a curve brush.
Curve brush, yes.
Right. So that's the steps. Once it's a curve brush, you then take the piece of geometry that we had, which is this one, okay? And then you stroke the curve. So you go to your stroke. You set it to, in this case I use polygroups because I don't want it wrapping around the end. I only want it to go from this end to the other end. And then from there, you can apply the curve that you've created from your SVG. That's the trick. That's the tool. That's the process. And then from there, you can turn that into a Boolean as a negative, or
just gonna stamp it on the mesh, right?
I don't like that description because it's not a stamp. It's not an alpha. It's a Boolean.
Yeah, it's gonna
add and subtract material.
It's gonna add it in the mesh, right?
It's either gonna cut away material or add material.
Cool.
So
I'm gonna try that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, so that's kind of like the overview of all of the things that you're struggling with right now. And like I said before, you've got to pay attention to your process. Your process is going to add. You're going to make a thing and then add to your process. Make a thing and then add to your process. Every step you add is going to add complexity. the last thing that you should ever do, and I really need you to understand this, the last thing you should be doing is detailing when your structure isn't even blocked out properly yet.
Right.
So make
Yeah.
make work from large to small. If you have a big texture that you're going to apply to the whole model, but it's going to add a lot of micro information like pores or little tiny rocks or greebles or nernies or all the little tiny structures, guess what? I got bad news for you. That's detailing. That's the last thing you get to do. That's the
All right.
last thing you get to do. Say it with me now. That's the last thing you get to do.
All right. The last thing I'm supposed to do. One thing though, which kind of worries me, is that when I was adding megascans, and if my rock was switching degrees, if you know what I mean, it's like it's not straight, right? It's kind of broken in a few planes because it was really low poly at first. I was having problem at laying one. So I wanted to lay one megaskin across multiple surfaces, which were like breaking off in a different angles. If that makes sense. Right?
Well, okay, so that may be something that we need to talk about at another time.
Yeah.
And here's why. There's a number of ways to do what you're talking about. Some of them you apply them with the layer system because it is a detail system. It is a detail process. You may want to apply them exclusively with the layer system. That way you can turn them up or turn them down in the layer system. Same thing is true with saving a morph target. You may want to save a morph target so you can use the morph brush to eradicate or remove or smooth out, stretched texture information. The other thing you can do is you can mask the front or polygroup the front and make it applicable to whatever your front angle is. See, if I grab this structure right here and I go group by front.
I was using masks because it's been a while since I used ZBrush. So
I understand, but let me finish what I'm saying. So I was able to group that front section, and then everything that's in shadow. We'll turn on double. Everything that was in shadow didn't get grouped. Okay, so being able to do that before you apply a texture. So if I come back in here, right?
Okay.
I've got this chunky texture, right? I group by front, and then I click on it to hide the back. No, I don't ever want to see you again. And I made a mistake. Crud. So I should be able to apply the texture to just this front angle. This is not how I work. This is not how I work at all. But I'm trying to get the texture to go across, to travel across the corner. There we go. So now we've got the texture traveling across the corner. It's getting a little stretched out over here. Not the end of the world, but if you come back in and you say, for instance, I'm going to mask this area, and then I'm going to reapply that texture.
Right.
The downside is that I've got a rough edge that I have to clean up.
Or just like smooth out the mask.
Yeah, I could have smoothed out the mask. I would have inverted it, smoothed it out towards the area I'm working in, then brought it back up, and then gone in and applied the texture. And that would usually do the trick. Again, this is one of the last things you get to do. Usually I would do most of my heavy texture work before I applied the booleans because of the problems that you saw with the booleans, where sometimes the rock got pulled over the boolean, which means that the boolean wouldn't cut properly because you'd have a weird little outcropping that didn't make any sense. When you work on your process, like what I'm talking about you doing, you've got to think through the steps. If this was an obelisk carved by the ancients, you know, what was the original rock shape? You know, okay, now I have to break this bottom piece off, and I have to add the etching. Okay, the etching is in a sub state because it's a subtool that's going to be added at the end through the Boolean process. But maybe I can do some etching or some distressing of the stone before I apply those. You kind of see how I'm kind of going back and forth between application and through and texture application and detail information. I'm kind of like trying to find that happy medium before I commit to the final structure. I do not have a clearly defined plan when it comes to the distressing and the etching or the carving, because sometimes they have to flip back and forth. But because of the way that I set this up, that really shouldn't be a problem, because the carving is applied through the Boolean process. So I can do that. I will do that at the end after I do everything else that I want to do to the stone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of working through this while I explain it to you, but it's also, there's more to it than that. You got to pick and choose the end result is part of what it is. You've got to pay attention to where things are going, because like right now, if one of the things that I'm doing, which I shouldn't be doing, if I add this texture into the carved out structure, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, that carved out structure should be refined, and I'm really making this curve wonky. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I should apply it differently. There's a different method that I use for applying that kind of damage to a piece, but usually I would do that beforehand. I'd go back up to the rock structure, I go back up to the rock structure and turn on the thing. So if I wanted to add that same thing, I'd come up here and I would damage the rock, not the etching. You see how the rock is being damaged, but the line is not getting moved?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's paying attention to the nonlinear workflow that I'm showing you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So do not apply your carving until you've done everything else. But the very last thing that you do before you apply your Boolean is adding your rock texture. Your rock texture should be the second to last step.
Yeah. How much decimation? Because I was too high.
You gotta feel it out.
How much would you recommend?
You gotta feel it. Okay. You gotta feel it out. I use 20% on almost everything, unless it's unreasonably dense. Like if somebody gives, I have gotten models in the past where they're 30 million polygons, and I'm like, or 30 million points. I always pay attention to the active points. I really should be able to relate that to what the final polygons are. I think these active points are very close in number. So the total polys are 500,000, while the total points is 2 million. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Can I share my screen real quick? Just want to ask you
can share your screen. I'm not stopping you.
See my screen?
No. Remember, we were having problems with your settings.
Wait.
Wait. You wait. Not my turn to wait.
Sorry, is it working now? Can you see it now? You gotta stop sharing your screen to see mine. I think that's the
no, I don't. I don't, but I will. Go ahead.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, so it was imported from Maya and it was Dynameshed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I go with low, so I don't go Z intensity to full. So this is like if I wanted that for whatever reason, that's fine. But like if I go lower intensity, I still get the edges that are. Can you see like the lines here are still there?
Well, that's yeah. So that's because the rock is not set up properly. That rock, that stone is
The base, you mean?
The base object that you're using is not a stone. It is a rough piece of geometry. So everything about that bothers me. And I'll show you what I mean. So if we go back to the model that I'm working on, that I'm working on with you, okay. You remember, and go back to my share screen for you so you can see what's going on. You remember that this model, when I started working on it, it didn't have any of those hard edges. I got rid of them. I ran a low-res ZBrush or low-res Dynamesh. I also polished edges where I could. I said, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of this. You know, I didn't want any structures on here that made me feel like I was restricted. Now, if I need a hard edge, I can create a hard edge, but it's...
so just, I need to refine it first like you did. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you can't... The understructure that you have is going to dictate what happens above. You can think of it. You can think about it a little bit like pizza dough. The pizza dough, if the pizza dough changes shape, then the tomato sauce and the cheese is going to be affected by that shape. You know, when you get a bubble in your pizza dough.
Yeah.
So your understructure has to have a shape that represents what you're working on. Like this hard corner, I know that this is on your concept art, but it's like one of those things that I want to affect really quickly because I know that, you know, a lot of rocks really don't have that shape, you know, so I want to come in here and I want to rough that up. You know, also, you know, if I come across these other areas, you can see, there we go. So I can go in and put in a bunch of stuff, and then I can kind of come across the top and just sort of flatten off some of these things with some of that polish tool that I showed you. You know,
nice.
We just sort of, you know, we keep the underlying structure. We get rid of the top surface so it looks like it's been refined a little bit, maybe. You know, you just basically see, this to me looks a lot more like a rock than, well, it's not ready to go.
Yeah.
It's getting there. You know, we can spend a lot of time on that too. I mean, if you're really going for something very specific, you can spend a lot of time, you know, making a thing look like another thing. And that concept art that you showed me, you know, there's nothing. This whole surface and this surface up here, they're a little weird in their incongruity. What I mean by that is that it's almost like somebody said, I'm going to take a rough-hewn rock, like a raw, natural rock. We're going to polish these surfaces up towards the top so that we can do some carving in them, but then the bottom is going to stay rough-hewn. And it was like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Normally, you know, something comes out of a quarry, and it's got distinct proportions and shape, and then they go and carve into it. And that's kind of what I'm telling you with the ZBrush, with sculpting. You have to figure out what are your proportions before you get to carve into it. You know, what does your rough surface look like? So that's really a major portion. That's really a major part of what I want you to understand for this object and for this work that you're doing.
I also feel that some parts are kind of perspective forced, if you know what I mean. It doesn't translate really well in 3D.
Well, that may be true. I wouldn't worry about that because here's what I'm trying to say to you. Your process for making the structure is what I'm having a conversation with you about. Trying to figure out if the concept artist threw in heavy perspective or something like that. that's a different conversation and not one I'm willing to have right now.
Yeah, I just meant that just looking at it, I was, yeah, it is a different topic, but
Yeah, it's a very different
like
topic.
that thing on the side, it's kind of looking wonky, but I'll just work around it. So
Well, we can talk about that. We can talk about that later. But for now, and for the stream, and for figuring out, hey, how would you do this? You know, this is the
yeah,
method. This is the method I'm suggesting that you kind of
yeah,
move
all
towards,
right,
and this is a process method that can help you create something that looks like it was part of a larger structure. And that's the other
yeah,
thing too is that, you know, um, when I look at this thing again and again and again, there's a lot of things that I find confusing about it. But
mm,
your job is not to ask, you know, all those questions unless it really drives you nuts, which this would drive me nuts. I'd be like, why does the pattern go around a corner and goes from, you know, what is clearly, hey, the front was from a quarry or was shaped before it was carved, to something that looks like it was rough hewn and still carved, you know? So that transition from this surface to this surface is the one that
yeah, yeah,
bugs
yeah,
me.
yeah. You're completely right because it looks like it's broken off, right? But
Yeah.
then
Well,
then
this could be, you know what this could be? To me, this could be a tile, and somebody took that tile and put it up on
yeah,
end, and
like an
that makes a
Aztec
lot of
tile.
sense. But a tile wouldn't have the texture run around the corner
Yeah,
normally, and
yeah,
there's a lot of questions with this concept art, and I'm not going to really get into that. Most of
yeah.
the time, you have to figure out how to make it work, not necessarily
To
why
make it
didn't
logical.
yeah, and that
Yeah.
goes back to what I'm saying before. Understand your process, understand the direction you're going in. And the more I look at the concept art too, a lot of those fine details that you want to add, I almost would skip them, because almost everything I'm seeing in this is large details and large details and uh, large details and some micro details. Everything else seems pretty clean. Like this entire surface, this
It's
front
clean.
facing
Yeah, flush.
surface is really clean by comparison to
Mm.
what I did to it. And not that clean, but a lot cleaner
Yeah,
than
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I made it, because I was dicking around. Like
Yeah.
this feels good to me because these little notches and things feel really nice. But
Mm.
this whole area here, it feels much more rough hewn, because this corner in the concept art comes shooting forward. It looks like this. It's so weird. Come on now. It looks like that to me.
That was what I was saying. That part is looking really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that flap or that side is just,
Yeah, there's something
yeah,
weird. There's something weird about it, and it's not something I need to worry about, or even you need to
or
figure out
me
how to.
either.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But you do need to get this texture built in there, and you need to make sure that that makes sense and that works for you. So anyway,
mm,
do you have any other
awesome.
questions about the process? Because I think we want to close up shop here, but I want to make sure I've answered all the big questions about
Yeah.
process.
Just to recap on the tool that you used to cut up the rock. What was it
I
called
just used the
again?
slice curve. That was just a slice
Slice
curve.
curve.
Yeah.
Okay.
and
Oh,
and
cool, cool.
and I could have done it in different ways, which might have been smarter, but the model was really dense, and I should have low resed it and then cut it up. And if in truth, if I grab the original, here's the original, right? Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take the original, and I'm just gonna go ahead and duplicate it, because I'm gonna send you back this file here. So
Awesome.
just because of time, if we go to Dynamesh and turn this down to 120, we'll turn it down to 120. Run that. Okay, so from here, what I would do is I'd duplicate this 3 times. So now it's duplicated. Okay. And because we have the brand new knife tool, I'm going to turn on the other object so I can see roughly where the cuts were. So in this case, I'm going to use the knife curve, right? And I need to see the big one, not the small ones. All right, so in this case, what I would do is I'd pick the angle that makes the most sense. And with the knife curve, I just throw away. Ooh, what did it do? That's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, I gotta go to one of the duplicates. Yeah, so we'll start with the top duplicate that I made, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna come in here and we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna there we go. So there's one. And then we take that one and we duplicate that one. And we take that one and we go in and we do like that.
Oh, that's super fast.
Yeah.
I'm glad I because I was gonna actually initially I was gonna like use the clay brush and just carve it in initially. That would take forever.
That's yeah, that takes too much time. So now I have this one, and then I've got a whole one up there. But I could just use that one. So I've got these three. So this one basically gets replaced. So this one has to come. We have to come in and knife curve that one.
Okay, can I use the same technique for like if you see the concept art, there are like two right on the edge, bottom edge. There's one like almost like just like a piece that was.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole purpose of breaking it up though is to give you options, because remember, sure. Yeah, so we kind of can't use this technique now that I'm using it, because I kind of don't have three pieces. I have three partial pieces. I think the other way I did it was possibly better. Let me go ahead and delete this. This is where a little bit of experimentation doesn't hurt, but it can slow you down a bit. So again, take the original, duplicate it, Dynamesh it down so it's not so ridiculous. 100, smooth off that edge, run there. All right, so from here, so this is what I'm gonna do. Slice. So slice curve. There's one piece, two pieces. We can move that around all we want. We can go ahead and group split, then run Dynamesh on the individual components.
To fill in the holes, or why are we Dynameshing?
It's closing the holes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, see it close the hole. It's not as pretty, but all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Nobody's gonna go inside and look at it from inside.
Right. And the only thing you got to do is, why is this black? It's black because for some reason it applies color. My color was on black. For some reason, when you do certain operations, it will try to apply a color to it.
Right. When my models turn black, I just go fill object, right, and it goes back.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but from here it's very much just like, oh, I'm gonna open up that crack. Oh, I'm gonna open up that crack.
Just smooth it. Oh,
I'm just smoothing it because I'm being cheap. I would actually spend the time to like carve it open the way that I want so that it feels right. But you can spend a lot. You can spend a lot of time breaking this into pieces, and at some point you've got to figure out: are you going to bring them back together, or are you going to keep them separate, or what? If I can give them just enough space that I can bring them back together, and they won't merge. I'll show you what I mean. So if I'm going to pull this one down just a tiny bit.
But yeah,
and then I'm going to switch to this one. Hold on a second. Give me a second. I'm going to switch to this one. Pull that one down a little bit so that they're not overlapping, so I can actually work on them.
Mm-hmm.
I can merge them into a single group is what I'm trying to say. So I go ahead and merge down and merge down. So now they're in the same subtool, and then I can come back in here and do auto groups. And then I can turn on groups in Dynamesh, and I can run that again and again and again, and they won't fuse into one object, or at least they shouldn't. Yeah. So now from here, as long as I'm paying attention, I can go ahead and say, okay, I'm gonna manipulate this guy. So okay, we're gonna open that up, and then we can come in here with some tools and fiddle around with it. You know, we can switch to the next one, do the same thing, fiddle around with it, see how their relationship works for each other. You know. And this is very crude. I mean, I can spend a lot of, like I said before, I can spend time on this and do more with it. Turn on the polish and project if I need to. Make sure I run auto groups, dynamesh them. Hopefully they'll stay separate.
Sorry, so because you're using that menu box, custom menu box, I would go to the polygroups, right, to do what you did to separate the polygroups.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and also don't run, you know, dynamesh at 2500. It should have been 25. It should be 250. 250. It should have been 250, not 2500. But now the machine's gonna throw a fit. So. But yeah, does this help though? Does this and you had a question.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, okay. I was just like I can, if I wanted to cut, if you check the cut stop real quick. So that small one on the, there are two small pieces there. Can you see the smaller rocks also cut up?
Yeah,
which you did actually. Yeah, I would go the same way about doing them as well.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could bring in another object and fit it to these objects and do a Boolean process to separate them out. You don't have to. You don't have to use just one process. You know, there's 100 ways to come at this thing, and none of them are
wrong.
Yeah, none of them are wrong. I may not be able to send you the file back because it looks like I'm going to crash.
It doesn't matter.
All right. So anyway, yeah. What else?
That's
That's
pretty much. I just need to.
All right. Well,
start sculpting, and then in the end, I'll try and try a couple of things for the etchings.
Yes.
The SGB there. Yeah.
Yes.
It's awesome. Absolutely. It's really powerful. Love it.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop streaming. Thanks, guys, for coming out. Those of you that wanted to check out this video.
Thank you, guys.
I may have Vincent come and ask more questions because he asked some really good, challenging questions. I want to thank everybody for coming out that was able to come out, and I'm going to try and be doing more videos as things